A special thanks to PlayStation for sponsoring this video, although I was covering this game no matter what. Death Stranding 2 just blew away gaming. From its massive critical acclaim and stupid high fan scores to its many improvements off of the original game. This video will be about as spoiler free as it gets, and if you like more single player coverage, be sure to follow my second channel, Evan Explains, where I plan on posting longer videos surrounding Death Stranding. I also have an extra code of Death Stranding 2 for anyone who's planning on playing it on PlayStation 5 or PS5 Pro and lives in the US. Just like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment on what Death Stranding means to you. I highly recommend that you watch a retrospective, a guide, really anything for the first game before you play the second one. This is a world of terminology that is very hard to grasp even while playing the game. And no matter how many logs or lore dumps that you may get, you will not be able to even care for the characters and the plot lines the same way without playing the first game. Although I'm not here to talk about story today, I will stress heavily that you will need to do more than use the recap from Death Stranding 2 in the menu to catch up with the plot. With that said, there is a lot in Death Stranding 2 that separates it from the first game, and I'm really not sure I believe it when people say it's nothing like the first game, because although Death Stranding 2 has a bit of a different identity, it's exactly what you'd want from a sequel. Build off of something first and deliver something special. At the core, Death Stranding is a game built for the community. It takes what should be a boring walking simulator, a dreadfully repetitive process of delivering packages, and flips it on its head. It puts altruism, or the belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others at its core. You will feel this theme when playing Death Stranding and Death Stranding 2, although I have to say your experience will differ depending on when you started playing the game. For example, there may be a monorail repair going in place if you're playing the game early, since I was playing at launch and a lot of this game needed to be repaired by the community, but it means that I have to contribute a lot more materials to get something like the monorail closer to operational, while you may begin playing Death Stranding 2 later on and have a much easier time knowing that that same monorail that I was investing all these materials into is now fully operational. You may have no issue navigating the world at all due to the various charge stations, the various highways, rails, bridges, zip lines, and more. But no matter what, you're always contributing to others' experience with your own. And isn't that beautiful? No matter what in your playthrough, you are helping out others without even necessarily knowing it. Take for example the whole like system. You will get likes for leaving weapons for other players, placing any sort of message down so that others can like it themselves, completing missions. Hell, little baby Lou gives you likes just for driving around and shaking him around like he's a little protein shake. But all of the likes don't mean a whole lot. They're not a currency that has a tangible use. You can't just buy weapons with likes. But the more likes that you do garner, and the more likes that you leave for other players, the higher chances that you'll see other structures that players have left. You can upgrade Sam's abilities more with more likes, but mostly, likes are just another form of the altruism the game naturally guides you towards. Like I said before, helping others in the community and the NPCs of the game is at the core of Death Stranding's identity. Likes are a massive feature in Death Stranding 1, but they're clearly more expanded upon here since there's a lot more structures and opportunities to run into them. But maybe sometimes hitting like a little too much can be a little scary. You might be rich with some likes, since sometimes you can run into some porters who are trying to commit insurance fraud, trying to take away the likes from you. Obviously, that's a joke, but I do find it funny that the longer that I've played Death Stranding 2, the harder it gets just from basic gameplay perspectives, since there's less players at the point in the game that I'm at, so there's just less infrastructure built all around by the community. It's not just the difficulty in the game that spikes, it's also the traversal difficulty. It's not just the difficulty from completing missions and maybe some harder enemies to fight, it's actually really just the infrastructure. Clearly I'm not alone in this feeling, since others have pointed out this need for help too. I think I've beaten the altruism and community side of the game down enough that at this point it's probably going to cause its own void out. But Death Stranding 2 just offers more variety of these moments than the first game had. Variety is a good word, since that's also what's found in Death Stranding 2's gameplay. For all the community creations that do exist to help out other porters along their journey, there is just as much emphasis on taking that away. Since Kojima is evil, the game has dynamic weather that actually impacts the experience a lot. For example, gatequakes. Gatequakes go far beyond just shaking up some land and causing landslides. They actually break the structures many contributed to, like those same highways and bridges we just talked about. I even had to repair a whole bridge after a quake took it out. Floods I haven't seen cause as much damage, but they make traversing the areas that were seemingly easy a giant pain to get around. Bushfires are incredibly weird and fitting for Death Stranding. Basically, a bunch of flaming whales fall from the sky and blow things up all around you while you're driving. Doesn't get more Kojima than that. Probably my favorite of these dynamic weather conditions was the sandstorms, which completely immerse you in that heart-pounding danger that a real tornado or a sandstorm would. I've been through a sandstorm while visiting Arizona, and while it wasn't as intense as getting pushed around in Death Stranding, the reality of not being able to see anything even an inch away is so jarringly accurate. On top of this, with the PS5's DualSense controller, the wind can be heard through the controller, and when you go to grip the packages that you're carrying, it's harder to push in the triggers. But there's also some great attention to detail in these dynamic weather events. If you go through the water, you get the sand off of Sam. You'll also suffer some sunburns that you need to wash off. But if you're wearing sunglasses, they'll actually get covered in sand too. The game does a good job of trying to explain why these weather effects come into play with tangible in-game lore about them, but I really don't think we need lore to explain why natural occurrences affect the in-game world. Maybe this is Kojima trying to apply BT logic to represent global warming, but who knows. Death Stranding 1 was horribly misrepresented by a lot of people as just a very boring walking simulator, without many finding the actual point of the message Kojima Productions was going for. And while I think there's valid criticism of the pacing of Death Stranding 1, I think a lot of people think that there was never any action to Death Stranding to begin with, and that's not true. In Death Stranding 1, there were still BT fights, there were still gunfights, and there was still tension, but it was less incentivized with less options to engage. In Death Stranding 2, you can be just as reserved and elusive, or you can be a whole damn warlord with a whole lot more gunplay options and combat choices. There are weapons that support BT killing with plenty of melee choices too. There's even non-lethal options for dealing with camps. It's really just a complete rework of the sandbox in that way. So I just don't love when people claim that the first game had no combat at all, when that couldn't be further from the truth. The Metacritic scores of the first game are significantly worse, so I decided to dive into why the larger gaming community felt this way. Fans have said that, quote, "This is proof that without Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid team, that he is directionless and an arrogant game creator. Despite the game getting publicly hammered for being an annoying walking sim, Kojima had the nerve to call all of his critics not smart enough to understand his vision, and then proceeds to shamelessly push Monster Energy drink ads on his players so many times in the game, pathetically making Monster Energy a core feature of his world. How the Kojima fanboys can't connect 2 and 2 together and see that Kojima games get bad when he doesn't have his Metal Gear teams is the reason why, unfortunately, another Death Stranding walking sim game is being created." And another one that says, "Admittedly, the graphics and soundtracks are... the rest of the game is deeply flawed in almost every way. The story and gameplay are so labored, it's not just fun at all, a real slog." While on the other side of Death Stranding 1, the critics were either pleased with the game or left some mixed receptions, like a lot of interesting mechanics that were implemented, but ultimately left stranded by tedious core gameplay. And another one by Games Radar who says, "Kojima's mysterious would-be epic has its moments but can't carry the weight of expectation." And finally, one that was actually a very positive review. Like any genre pushing a work of art, Death Stranding is sure to be divisive. That said, the unflinching vision of its director is a breath of fresh air in an industry increasingly unwilling to swing for the fences. It's important to stress that there was a lot of expectations for what Death Stranding would be based off of the trailers, and when people didn't get the exact game that they envisioned in their head, there was definitely a lot of pushback. But Kojima Productions took this feedback really well, seeing as Death Stranding 2 has been praised for all of the supposed shortcomings that the first game had. But I think it's also funny that Kojima heard people were having too much fun in Death Stranding 2 and decided to change the game. In a discussion with Woodkid, one of the artists working on Death Stranding, Kojima had this to say: "I'm going to be very honest. We have been testing the game with players and the results are too good. They like it too much. That means something is wrong. We have to change something." It's very obvious, at least, that Death Stranding 2's too good of gameplay has some inspirations for gunplay and stealth, like its boss fights too. Some a little too fourth wall breakingly obvious. Death Stranding 2 may have expanded on its community features like we discussed before, but where it really offers a new experience is in the variety of action sequences. The game feels like a firework could go off at any moment, like someone has a lighter held up to the fuses of different fireworks, and the action sequences have different sized fuses, so when they burst, it really grabs you by surprise. This, to me at least, breathed this really realistic feeling that, much like those weather events we talked about before, these evoke this realistic fight or flight reaction. I was almost never prepared for when a major fight was going to break out. Even if I was warned of a BT in an area, it was still so surprising. There were times where I had too much on my truck while it was raining, leading to my truck losing everything from simply melting away. Another time I was rescuing someone, only to realize that my truck's battery wasn't going to be strong enough. So I ended up just walking the rest of the way and losing that truck, which admittedly wasn't mine to begin with, but another Sam's out there in the world. So if that goes to show you how much the community has impact on this game, how about me never even building my own truck and just using other people's vehicles? We had talked about the like system before, and upgrades are nothing new to Death Stranding. When you deliver something to a base, basically you get upgrades on a star rating. For one, you have a whole myriad of options in the skill tree that each function to really just support the journey rather than fundamentally changing it. But the upgrades for getting higher ratings at bases span from stronger weapons like a shotgun that can get a 3 burst and a grenade launcher to make your whole life easier in liberation missions, to hologram grenades to make decoys of Sam or make fake rocks to hide behind, to whole exoskeletons that will improve your experience with not only combat, but traversal too. The exoskeletons alone are a must for anyone who wants to engage in combat, as combat does feel a little slow without it. I will say that I did have times that combat felt a little repetitive, and that could just be on me not experimenting with the sandbox more, but I also just think that Death Stranding is not a combat-driven game like many want it to be. Take dodging and general gunplay for example. Sam is just not Solid Snake. He will trip on a small rock. He will be swept away by the tiniest river current. And swapping from delivery to combat is really janky, since you still have to take the time to offload everything onto a truck or the ground, taking away from the pacing of combat. So adding in stealth and full speed combat like it's Metal Gear just feels a little weird. I am really bad at stealth in a lot of games admittedly, so I end up just going guns blazing most of the time. I will update my opinion on combat in a different video the further that I get into this game, if things really change. I know a lot of people's reviews of the first game felt like it was missing combat, and Kojima probably added more of this as a more streamlined feature to help people try Death Stranding 2, but I really think that combat is a lesser part of the experience. That experience being the altruism and the connection. Even some of the cooler bosses I felt weren't as fun because of the combat format in this game. It's really such a minor thing. I did enjoy the combat, I just didn't think Death Stranding needed more of it to justify buying the game. However, the quality of life improvements and the overhauls in combat was a huge piece of community feedback, so it was cool to see that it was added in general. Now, one of the things that I really do enjoy in Death Stranding in regards to combat is a really great way to get an aerial view of the enemies that you're going to fight, or a whole region that you may be unsure of as well. In the most wacky scenario, what if I told you that you throw an NPC in the air, then you scan the whole area around you, then you catch that same NPC? It's great. Overall, I've gone back and forth on my feelings in regards to combat in Death Stranding, and while I find it to be secondary to the experience, I think I will change or reassure my thoughts on combat as time goes on. For the rest of the new features that are in Death Stranding, they're more or less a lot of quality of life. I think my new favorite is the music player, since you can listen to every single track that you've heard while roaming around as long as you want to, or as long as you're in an area connected to the chiral network. It doesn't interfere with other songs either, as those will just pause your music to play the new song instead. I really appreciate a feature like this since it helps in some of the world trekking, although I could see where the silence was more intentional while traversing too. So for some, they may not use the music player, but again, it's great that it's here. Finally, if you're unsure of how Kojima this Kojima game is, I got you covered. Here's some of the clips I was able to find just in my time playing. This one isn't me admittedly, but somebody in the community found that Kojima drew himself as a constellation. Then there's these clips.
To you, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear someone. Happy birthday to you.
The world outside North and Central America had survived. Ours was not the last bastion of humanity, but Australia had suffered the Death Stranding too.
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. No, raindrops are falling on my head.
Hey, not bad, little porter. Not bad at all.
And I said I didn't like the way he got things done. Sleeping
Okay, Lou.
on the
Time
job.
for some nom-noms.
Those raindrops are falling on my head. They keep falling. But there's one. Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. No, raindrops are falling on my head.
Hey, not bad, little porter. Not bad at all.
And I said I didn't like the way he got things done. Sleeping
Okay, Lou.
on the
Time
job.
for some nom-noms.
Those raindrops are falling on my head. They keep falling.
No, no!
-61.
So with that said, I think Death Stranding is an easy Game of the Year contender. It's more streamlined than before, but its structures, stories, gameplay, and messaging are all there. And at the center of it all, there's a strong message of altruism. I want to once again thank PlayStation for sponsoring this video. You can check out Death Stranding 2 with the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video, and expect more of these videos on my second channel, @EvanExplains. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.